Welcome to HOA boardroom battles. This one escalated fast in the front yard. Welcome in. This one gets wild fast, so settle in and let me walk you through the day the Ironwood Trails HOA board tried to tow my livelihood out from under me and learn the hard way that I keep better records than they do. You picked the wrong day to test me, I said, and Rachel Thomas did not even blink. She just kept shouting at the tow driver to drop the wheel lift and take me anyway. The moving truck had been there for maybe 8 minutes, unloading a couch my sister was bringing for our family event this weekend, and Rachel was already treating it like a federal crime scene. I run a mobile detailing business, so my driveway is my workspace, and my work van was parked exactly where it always is, legally, with every permit the HOA ever asked for stuck to the windshield. Rachel did not care. She wanted a tow, she wanted it now, and she wanted it to be mine. She had that handheld plate scanner out, the kind tow companies use to log vehicles before they hook them, and it was beeping like a smoke alarm. Rachel held it up like a trophy, aiming it at my van, my sister's sedan, and even the moving truck. Every beep was another data point she thought she could weaponize. I had my phone out too, recording light on, screen turned away, so the camera angle stayed clean. Rachel noticed, and her smile got meaner. "Keep talking," she said. "I love adding notes." That was her thing, that line. She said it every time someone pushed back, like she was building a case file in real time, and every word you said was evidence for her personal prosecution. The tow driver looked trapped. He was a guy in his 40s, gray Dickies coveralls, leaning against the cab of his truck like he wished he had called in sick. Rachel kept barking instructions telling him the moving truck was a commercial vehicle, which it was not, and my work van was parked illegally, which it was not. I stepped closer and kept my voice calm. "My van has every permit you asked for, Rachel. It is in my driveway. The moving truck is unloading furniture for a family event. You called a tow for a 10-minute stop." She did not even pretend to care. She tapped her scanner again and said, "You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last." That line stuck with me, because it was not a threat, it was a mission statement. Rachel had been HOA president of the Ironwood Trails HOA board for 2 years, and in that time she had turned parking enforcement into a full-time crusade. Every newsletter was about violations. Every board meeting was about compliance. Every walk through the neighborhood was an audit. She carried that scanner like it was a badge, and she used the tow contract like it was a nuclear option she could deploy at will. The HOA had signed a deal with a tow company that gave them unlimited authority to remove any vehicle Rachel flagged. No questions asked, no waiting period. The tow company got 50% of the fees, the HOA got 50%, and Rachel got to act like she was cleaning up Gotham City, one guest pass at a time. I told the tow driver he was not authorized to take my van, and if he touched it I would file a police report for theft. He looked at Rachel. She waved her phone like it was proof of something and said, "I have full authority under the parking addendum. Take the van." The driver asked to see the violation notice. Rachel did not have one. She said she did not need one because the tow contract allowed immediate removal for safety violations, and she was calling this a fire lane obstruction. My driveway is not a fire lane. It is a driveway. I said that out loud. Rachel said, "Keep talking, I love adding notes." I almost said nothing else, because silence makes people talk, and sure enough, Rachel kept going. She told the driver I had been flagged multiple times for non-compliance, which was a lie, and that management had authorized her to enforce zero-tolerance parking rules during high-traffic weekends, which was also a lie. I let her finish. Then I asked her to repeat the part about management authorization. She did, louder this time, like volume made it true. I nodded and kept recording. That was the moment I knew I had her, because Rachel had just claimed authority she did not legally have in clear terms on camera, and I was going to use it to request a temporary order to stop enforcement while the dispute was reviewed. The tow driver finally made a decision. He looked at Rachel, looked at me, looked at the moving truck still unloading furniture, and said he was not comfortable taking the van without a written violation notice, in a 24-hour warning period. Rachel lost it. She started yelling about the contract, about his company obligations, about how she would have him fired and the company banned from the neighborhood. The driver climbed into his cab, made a phone call, and then drove off. Rachel stood there shaking, keys jangling in her hand like she wanted to throw them. She turned to me and said, "This is not over. You just made the list." I asked what list. She did not answer. She just walked back to her sedan, a gray Camry with an HOA parking decal that said board member in letters big enough to read from space, and drove away. My sister came out of the house with a box of dishes, looked at the empty street, and asked what the hell just happened. I told her Rachel Thomas, HOA president, just tried to tow my work van to make an example out of me, and I had the whole thing on video. My sister asked if that was legal. I said no, and that was the point. I went inside and called my attorney. His name is Mark, and he specializes in HOA disputes, which in Tennessee means he spends half his time telling people their board is insane and the other half proving it in court. I told him what happened. He asked if I had the recording. I said yes. He asked if Rachel had claimed management authorization. I said yes, on camera, word for word. Mark went quiet for a second and then said that is the entire case. If she claimed authority she does not have and tried to enforce a rule that does not exist, that is bad faith enforcement, and you can stop her cold with a TRO request. I asked how fast we could move. He said, if you want an emergency stop, I need one document today, and Rachel is stalling on purpose, so we are going to force her to produce records and let her dig the hole deeper. That was the plan. Force Rachel to produce the parking enforcement records, the tow contract, the violation log, and any communication with management about high traffic weekends and zero tolerance rules. If she had been making it up as she went, the records would not match her claims, and we would have everything we needed to show bad faith. If she had actual records, we would still have the video of her claiming authority she did not have, and we would use that to argue selective enforcement and retaliation. Either way, Rachel was about to learn that I keep better records than she does. I spent the rest of the afternoon pulling my own documentation. Every email Rachel had ever sent me, every notice I had ever received, every permit I had ever applied for, every photo I had ever taken of my van parked legally in my driveway. I had timestamps on everything. I had a folder labeled HOA compliance that went back 18 months. I had a second folder labeled Rachel harassment that went back 6 months. I had a third folder labeled just in case where I kept copies of every rule the HOA had ever published, including 3 different versions of the parking addendum that contradicted each other. I sent it all to Mark. He called me back 20 minutes later and said, "This is beautiful." She has no idea what she just walked into. The next morning I got an email from Rachel. It was sent at 6 in the morning, which meant she had been up all night thinking about me, and it was long. The subject line said parking violation final notice, which was hilarious because I had never received a first notice. The body of the email was a complaint log entry that was obviously written in Rachel's voice, full of phrases like flagrant disregard for community standards and repeated refusal to comply with lawful directives. It said my work van had been observed parked in the driveway during business hours on multiple occasions, which violated the commercial vehicle restriction in the parking addendum, and that I had been verbally warned twice, which was a lie. It said the moving truck incident was the final straw, and that my van would be towed on site if observed parked in the driveway again. It was signed Rachel Thomas, President, Ironwood Trails HOA Board. I forwarded it to Mark. He replied with one word, gold. Then he sent a second email explaining why. The complaint log entry was written in the first person, which meant Rachel was acting as both the enforcement officer and the decision maker, which is a conflict of interest. The email claimed verbal warnings that did not exist, which was either a lie or an admission that she had been harassing me without documentation. The email threatened immediate towing without a hearing, which violated the HOA bylaws that required a written notice and a 10-day cure period before enforcement. And the email was sent from Rachel's personal email address, not the HOA management email, which meant she was acting outside her authority as president. Mark said, "She just gave us 4 violations in one email. I am filing the TRO request this morning." I spent the morning organizing my response. Mark needed 3 things. 1, a timeline of every interaction I had ever had with Rachel, including dates, times, and witnesses. 2, a copy of every parking permit and decal I had ever been issued, with proof that my van was always in compliance. 3, a declaration under penalty of perjury that I had never received a verbal warning, a written warning, or any kind of notice before yesterday. I had all of it ready by noon. Mark filed the TRO request that afternoon, and the hearing was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. The request asked the court to temporarily stop all HOA parking enforcement against me until the dispute could be reviewed, and it included the video of Rachel claiming management authorization, the email with the fabricated complaint log, and my entire compliance history. Mark said, "If the judge watches the video, you win. If the judge reads the email, you win. If the judge does both, Rachel loses her job." Rachel did not take it well. I know this because she showed up at my house that night, after dark, and slapped a warning sticker on my driver's side window. I was inside eating dinner when I heard the sound of adhesive peeling, and I looked out the front window just in time to see Rachel walking back to her sedan, key ring jangling, phone in her other hand. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, but she was already pulling away. I looked at my van. The sticker was bright yellow, about the size of a postcard, and it said parking violation in block letters with a QR code and a handwritten note that said final warning, tow authorized. No signature, no date, no reference number, just a sticker slapped on glass like a Post-it note. I took photos from every angle. Then I checked my security camera. I have a Ring doorbell on the front porch, and it had captured the whole thing. Rachel had parked on the street, walked up the driveway, pressed the sticker onto my window, and walked back to her car without knocking, without leaving a notice, without saying a word. The timestamp said 8:47 p.m. I saved the video and sent it to Mark with the subject line, "She just did it again." He replied at 10 that night, "This is harassment. Bring the sticker to the hearing. Do not remove it. Leave it exactly where it is so the judge can see it." I left the sticker. The next morning, my neighbors started asking questions. The neighborhood gossip chain in Ironwood Trails runs through the mailbox cluster, which is the unofficial courtroom for every dispute, and by 9 in the morning, 3 people had texted me asking if I was getting evicted. I told them no. I was being targeted by Rachel Thomas for parking my work van in my own driveway, and I had a court hearing on Friday to stop her. One of the neighbors, a guy named Carl who sat on the board as treasurer, texted back and said, "Rachel has been doing this to everyone. You are just the first one to fight back." Carl became my ally. He called me that afternoon and said he wanted to talk off the record. We met at the mailbox cluster, which is a long row of metal boxes under a wooden roof at the edge of the neighborhood entrance, and Carl brought a folder. He said, "I have been keeping copies of everything Rachel sends to management, and you need to see this." He opened the folder and showed me a stack of emails. The first one was from Rachel to the HOA management company, dated 3 weeks ago, with the subject line "Enforcement Priority Request." The email said, "We need to make an example out of one homeowner to show the neighborhood we are serious about parking compliance. I recommend targeting the mobile detailing van on Oakmont Drive because it is the most visible violation, and the owner has been resistant to verbal warnings." I asked Carl if he was serious. He said, "Dead serious." Management replied and told her to follow standard procedures and document everything, and Rachel replied again saying she would handle it personally. Carl flipped to the next email. This one was from Rachel to the tow company, dated 2 weeks ago, with the subject line "Authorization Update." The email said, "Effective immediately, I am authorizing you to tow any vehicle I flag without waiting for a written notice or a cure period. The HOA board has approved a zero-tolerance enforcement policy during high-traffic weekends, and I am the designated point of contact for all towing decisions. Carl looked at me and said, "The board never voted on that. Rachel made it up." I asked Carl why he was showing me this. He said because Rachel is out of control and the rest of the board is too scared to stop her. She has threatened to sue 2 board members for defamation. She has filed ethics complaints against the management company, and she has been CCing her personal attorney on every email for the past month. The insurance company sent us a risk warning last week, saying our liability policy might not cover her enforcement actions if she is acting outside her authority, and the board is starting to panic. I asked if he would testify at the hearing. He said, "I will do better than that. I will file a board member complaint and attach these emails. If the judge sees this, Rachel is done." If you are enjoying this chaos, hit the like button and subscribe, because HOA enforcement stories only get wilder from here. Carl filed the complaint the next day. Mark called me Thursday afternoon and said, "The judge just received a supplemental filing from a sitting board member with internal emails showing Rachel fabricated her authority, lied to the tow company, and targeted you specifically as an example. This is the nail in the coffin. The hearing is tomorrow at 2. Bring the sticker, bring your permits, and bring a calm attitude because you already won." I asked what Rachel would do. Mark said, "She will show up and she will lie, and the judge will eat her alive." The hearing was at the Wilson County Sheriff's Substation in Franklin, in a mediation room off the lobby. The room was small, beige walls, folding table, plastic chairs, and a deputy sitting in the corner watching the whole thing like he was expecting a fistfight. The judge was a magistrate named Collins, mid-50s, reading glasses, no patience for nonsense. Rachel showed up in a gray pantsuit with a rolling briefcase like she was about to argue a Supreme Court case. She had her attorney with her, a younger guy in a cheap blazer who looked like he had just realized he was on the wrong side. I had Mark, I had my folder of documents, and I had the yellow sticker still stuck to my driver's side window, which I had photographed that morning as proof I had not tampered with it. Judge Collins opened with a question for Rachel. He asked her to explain why she had attempted to tow my vehicle without a written notice or a hearing. Rachel started with a speech about community standards and safety compliance and the need for strong leadership and enforcement. Judge Collins let her talk for about 30 seconds and then cut her off. He said, "That is not what I asked. Did you or did you not attempt to tow this man's vehicle from his own driveway without providing him a written notice or a 10-day cure period as required by your own bylaws?" Rachel said, "I provided verbal warnings." Judge Collins asked when. Rachel said, "On multiple occasions." Judge Collins asked for documentation. Rachel said, "I do not document verbal warnings because they are informal." Judge Collins said, "So you have no proof?" Rachel said, "I have my word." Judge Collins said, "Your word is not evidence." Mark stood up and introduced the video. He played the recording of Rachel telling the tow driver she had full authority under the parking addendum and that management had authorized zero-tolerance enforcement. Rachel's attorney tried to object, saying the video was taken without consent. Judge Collins said, "Tennessee is a one-party consent state, and your client was standing in a driveway yelling at a tow driver in broad daylight. The video is admitted." Mark played the part where Rachel said, "I have full authority under the parking addendum," and then the part where she said, "You are not the first person I have corrected and you will not be the last." Judge Collins asked Rachel if she had authority under the parking addendum to authorize immediate towing without a notice. Rachel said, "Yes." Judge Collins asked her to show him the section. Rachel opened her briefcase and pulled out a printed copy of the parking addendum. She flipped through it for 30 seconds, then a minute, then 2 minutes. She could not find it. Judge Collins asked if she needed more time. Rachel said, "It is in here somewhere." Judge Collins said, "Take your time." Rachel kept flipping. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something. Rachel closed the addendum and said, "I was operating under the authority granted to me by the board." Judge Collins asked if the board had voted to grant her that authority. Rachel said yes. Judge Collins asked for the meeting minutes. Rachel said the vote was conducted via email. Judge Collins asked for the email. Rachel said, I did not bring it. Judge Collins said, so you have no proof the board granted you this authority? Rachel said, I am the president. Judge Collins said, that is not an answer. Mark introduced Carl's supplemental filing. He handed the judge a packet of emails showing Rachel had requested permission to make an example out of me, had claimed board approval for zero-tolerance enforcement that did not exist, and had told the tow company she was the designated point of contact for all towing decisions without a board vote. Judge Collins read the emails. He looked at Rachel. He asked if she had written these emails. Rachel said, yes, but they are being taken out of context. Judge Collins said, the context is that you fabricated your authority, lied to a tow company, and targeted a homeowner for selective enforcement. That is bad faith. Rachel started to argue. Judge Collins said, I am not finished. Judge Collins introduced the yellow sticker. He asked Rachel if she had placed a warning sticker on my vehicle at 8:47 p.m. the night before the hearing. Rachel said, I was conducting a routine patrol. Judge Collins said, at 8:47 p.m., in the dark, without knocking or leaving a notice, after you had already been served with a TRO request. Rachel said, the sticker is standard enforcement. Judge Collins said, the sticker has no signature, no date, no reference number, and no legal authority. It is harassment. Rachel tried to interrupt. Judge Collins said, you are going to sit there and listen. He granted the temporary restraining order. He said, the HOA is prohibited from enforcing any parking rules against this homeowner until a full hearing can be conducted to review the parking addendum, the tow contract, and the board's authority to delegate enforcement powers to individual officers. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to provide copies of all parking enforcement records, all tow authorizations, and all board meeting minutes related to parking policy for the past 2 years. If the HOA fails to produce these records within 10 days, I will assume they do not exist and rule in favor of the homeowner. He looked at Rachel and said, you are also personally prohibited from contacting this homeowner, entering his property, or placing any stickers, notices, or enforcement materials on his vehicle or his driveway. If you violate this order, I will hold you in contempt. Rachel stood up. Her face was red. She said, this is not over. Judge Collins said, yes, it is. Sit down. Rachel sat down. Her attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Judge Collins dismissed the hearing and told us to come back in 2 weeks for a follow-up. Mark and I walked out into the lobby. The deputy was grinning. He said, I have been working here for 12 years, and I have never seen a judge shut someone down that hard. Mark said, she earned it. I went home and pulled the sticker off my window. I saved it in a plastic sleeve and filed it with the rest of my documentation. That night, Carl texted me and said the board had called an emergency meeting. He said, Rachel tried to argue that the judge was biased and that you had manipulated the evidence, and the board told her to shut up and sit down. They are voting tonight on whether to strip her committee assignments and remove her as point of contact for enforcement. I asked if he thought they would do it. He said, they do not have a choice. The insurance company sent another warning this afternoon saying they might drop our coverage if Rachel stays in charge of enforcement. The vote happened at 8. Carl texted me the results at 9. Rachel had been removed from all enforcement duties, removed from the parking committee, removed from the compliance committee, and removed as the designated point of contact for the tow company. She was still technically president, but only because removing her completely required a membership vote, and that would take 2 months to organize. Carl said, she is basically a figurehead now. The board told her if she contacts you again, they will file a restraining order on behalf of the HOA. I asked what Rachel said. Carl said, she stormed out of the meeting and said she was going to sue all of us. No one believes her. The follow-up hearing happened 2 weeks later. Rachel did not show up. Her attorney filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the HOA had taken corrective action and that the dispute was moot. Judge Collins denied the motion and said, "Corrective action does not erase the harm that was done, and it does not prevent future harm. I am ordering the HOA to publish a clear parking policy to all residents and retract every notice Rachel issued during the crackdown. The HOA is also ordered to refund any towing fees or fines collected under Rachel's enforcement actions in the past 6 months. If any homeowner disputes the refund amount, they can file a claim with this court, and I will review it." Mark stood up and asked the judge to make the parking policy requirement specific. He said the HOA currently has 3 different versions of the parking addendum in circulation, and none of them match the enforcement actions Rachel took. "We need one policy, in writing, distributed to all residents, with clear definitions of commercial vehicles, guest parking, fire lanes, and tow authorization procedures." Judge Collins agreed. He said the HOA has 30 days to draft and distribute a unified parking policy. The policy must be approved by the board in a public meeting and posted on the HOA website. If the HOA fails to comply, I will appoint a special master to draft the policy for them and bill the HOA for the cost. The HOA published the policy 3 weeks later. It was 6 pages long, written in plain English, and it covered every scenario Rachel had tried to weaponize. Commercial vehicles were defined as vehicles over 10,000 pounds or vehicles with active commercial signage, which meant my work van was legal. Guest parking was allowed for up to 72 hours with a dashboard pass issued by the management company. Fire lanes were clearly marked with red curb paint and signage. Tow authorizations required a written notice, a 10-day cure period, and approval from the management company, not the HOA president. The policy was distributed to every household by certified mail and posted on the website with a FAQ section and a contact form for disputes. Rachel quit the board a week later. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood saying she was stepping down for personal reasons and that she was proud of the work she had done to improve community standards. No one replied. The board elected a new president, a retired engineer named Tom, who ran on a platform of transparency and common sense. Tom's first act was to renegotiate the tow contract and add a clause requiring the tow company to notify homeowners before removing a vehicle and to provide photographic evidence of the violation. The tow company agreed because they were tired of dealing with Rachel too. Carl texted me a month later and said, "Rachel put her house on the market. I asked if she was moving. He said, she listed it last week and it sold in 3 days. She is out by the end of the month. I asked where she was going. He said no idea, but the new owners are thrilled because they do not have to deal with her. I said that was probably the best outcome for everyone. Carl said, you did the neighborhood a favor. Rachel was a nightmare and no one had the guts to fight back until you did. I told him I just kept receipts and let her dig her own hole. He said, that is what made it perfect. I kept running my mobile detailing business from my driveway. No more stickers, no more harassment, no more tow threats. The new board even asked me to join the parking committee, which I politely declined because I had spent enough time dealing with HOA parking enforcement to last a lifetime. I did agree to serve as a liaison between the board and the homeowners who run businesses from home, and we drafted a set of guidelines that balanced community aesthetics with the reality that people work from home now and need parking space for equipment and clients. The guidelines passed unanimously at the next annual meeting, and Tom sent me a thank you email saying it was the first vote in 2 years that did not turn into a screaming match. Rachel never came back. I saw her once more, driving out of the neighborhood with a U-Haul trailer behind her Camry, and she did not look at me. I waved anyway, because sometimes the best revenge is being polite to someone who tried to destroy you and failed. The neighborhood is quieter now. The mailbox cluster is back to being a place where people pick up packages instead of gossip about enforcement. And the tow truck has not been back once since Rachel left. Tom told me at the last board meeting that violations are down 70%, compliance is up, and homeowner satisfaction is the highest it has been in 5 years. He said, turns out when you stop treating people like criminals, they start acting like neighbors. I still keep the yellow sticker in a plastic sleeve, filed with the rest of my documentation, just in case I ever need to remind myself that keeping receipts and staying calm can beat a tyrant every single time. Rachel lost her committee role immediately. The HOA was forced to publish a clear parking policy to all residents and retract every notice she issued during the crackdown. And the insurance risk warning that made the board panic turned into the leverage that ended her reign. The board even voted to require actual evidence before fines at their next meeting, which means no more enforcement by bribes and personal grudges. Tom said it was the policy Rachel fought against the hardest, and now it is the reason the neighborhood actually trusts the board again. Carl told me last week that Rachel tried to get on the HOA board in her new neighborhood and got voted down in the first election because someone Googled her name and found court records from our dispute. He said she tried to interrupt during the candidate forum and the meeting voted anyway, which is exactly what she used to do to other people, and karma is real. I said I hope she learned something. Carl said, people like Rachel never learn. They just find a new place to be miserable. I am hosting the family event this weekend, the one Rachel tried to sabotage. And my driveway is full of cars, and a moving truck is parked on the street with a guest pass on the dashboard, and no one is panicking about violations. My sister brought the couch, my parents brought a grill, and the neighbors brought lawn chairs because Tom sent out an email saying block parties are encouraged now, as long as you clean up after. It feels like a real neighborhood again, and I am grateful I fought back instead of just taking it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.